At Nissan's plant in Aguascalientes, Mexico, workers are building a 2026 Versa, a small sedan with 4 doors, 6 airbags, and room for a family. The car remains a strong seller in Mexico, but Nissan stopped offering it in the United States after the 2025 model year. America did not lose the ability to build or import a basic small car. It lost the business case. The Versa had been the last new car in the United States with a base price below $20,000, and when it left, an entire price category left with it. That final decision came after half a century of fuel crises, trade restrictions, safety calculations, tax rules, dealership economics, and millions of individual purchases. Americans chose larger vehicles, but every choice was made inside a market that rewarded height, weight, and price. The result can be seen in almost any parking lot. The small hatchbacks are aging, the sedans are thinning out, and the vehicles replacing them wear black wheel arches and sit a few inches higher. Some are genuine trucks, some are cars under the sheet metal, and some are cars under federal law despite being advertised as sport utility vehicles. The label matters less than the direction. In model year 2024, vehicles legally classified as trucks made up about 2/3 of American new vehicle production, while sport utility vehicles legally classified as trucks alone accounted for almost half. That market would have looked impossible when the federal government first separated cars from trucks. In 1975, light trucks represented roughly 15% of American vehicle sales. Most were purchased because someone expected to carry lumber, pull equipment, or work beyond the pavement. A small car carried a different promise. It was inexpensive transportation for a household that needed to get to work. Detroit had sold compact cars before the 1970s, but the American industry still made its best money from broad sedans with large engines and generous option sheets. Then motorists began waiting in gasoline lines. The Arab oil embargo of 1973 cut supplies to the United States, and the world price of oil first doubled and then quadrupled. A driver who had treated fuel economy as a line in a brochure could now watch the station attendant hang out a no gas sign. Small Japanese cars had already reached American ports, but the crisis changed what buyers saw in them. A Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic no longer looked like an undersized foreign curiosity. It looked like a way to pass the gasoline line less often. Detroit answered with cars such as the Chevrolet Vega, Ford Pinto, and later the front-wheel drive Chevrolet Citation and Ford Escort. Some were deeply flawed, and the failures left a mark that efficient engineering alone could not erase. Still, the country had entered an era when a small car could be a mainstream car. President Gerald Ford signed the Energy Policy and Conservation Act in December of 1975. The law created corporate average fuel economy standards with requirements beginning for passenger cars in model year 1978 and for light trucks a year later. The passenger car target climbed from 18 miles per gallon in 1978 to 27.5 by 1985. The light truck target for 1985 was 19.5 miles per gallon. That difference reflected the market Congress saw in 1975 when trucks were primarily tools and cars carried most families. The distinction became valuable as soon as families began buying trucks. Before that shift was complete, Washington made another decision that changed the small car business. By 1980, Japanese manufacturers were taking sales from American companies with cars that were often smaller, more efficient, and better assembled than the domestic competition. American factories were closing, auto workers were losing jobs, and pressure for import limits reached the Reagan administration. In 1981, Japan agreed to hold passenger car exports to the United States to 1,680,000 vehicles during the first year. The limit protected American production, but it also placed a scarce value on every Japanese car that crossed the Pacific. If Toyota could send only a fixed number, there was little reason to use one of those slots on the cheapest model it could build. Japanese manufacturers added equipment, raised prices, developed larger cars, and expanded American production. Honda opened its automobile plant in Marysville, Ohio, and began building Accords there in 1982. Toyota later joined General Motors at the former Fremont Assembly Plant in California, where American workers built versions of compact Japanese designs. The small car survived, but the import limit taught its strongest producers to earn more from each sale. Cheap transportation was already being pushed upward. A second oil shock had raised fuel prices again near the end of the 1970s, but by the middle of the next decade, the pressure eased. Gasoline became more stable, engines became more efficient, and buyers recovered an appetite for power, space, and weight. Federal officials lowered the passenger car fuel economy requirement for several model years after 1985 because fuel prices had fallen and demand for efficient cars had weakened. The target returned to 27.5 miles per gallon in 1990, where it remained for years. The light truck standard stayed much lower. That gap was waiting for the right vehicle. Inside Chrysler, Lee Iacocca supported a front-wheel drive van that could fit inside a garage, carry a family, and drive more like a car than a full-size van. The Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager reached showrooms for the 1984 model year. Families did not care that the federal fuel economy system treated these passenger-carrying vehicles as light trucks. Manufacturers had reason to care. A minivan could perform the work of a station wagon while living in the regulatory fleet with the easier fuel economy target. Sport utility vehicles followed the same path from equipment to family transportation. The Jeep Cherokee, Ford Explorer, and Chevrolet Suburban offered cargo room, towing ability, four-wheel drive, and a view over the roof of the car ahead. Some buyers needed those abilities. Others liked what the shape said about safety, independence, and weekends that might never occur. The accounting worked either way. During the 1990s, a manufacturer could sell an increasingly comfortable sport utility vehicle under the light truck rules, charge more for it than for a sedan, and earn a larger return for much of the same corporate machinery. The federal government also maintained a 25% tariff on many imported light trucks, a policy dating to 1964. That tariff did not apply to ordinary imported passenger cars, but it helped shelter the American truck business from some foreign competition. Domestic companies came to depend on the profits. Advertising followed the money. A small car was commonly sold with a monthly payment, a fuel economy figure, and a low starting price. A sport utility vehicle was sold with a family, a mountain road, and the suggestion that preparedness had a body shape. The vehicle in the commercial was more profitable, so it received the better commercial. Customer preference was real, but it was being fed. Road design strengthened the message. American subdivisions spread farther from workplaces, parking spaces remained generous, and gasoline was lightly taxed compared with fuel in much of Europe. A small car saved fuel and space, but in many American communities, space was the one thing a driver was not paying much to conserve. Then size began to sell itself. A driver surrounded by taller vehicles had to look through them at intersections, park beside them, and meet them in a collision. Buying something taller restored the view. Buying something heavier improved the odds for the people inside it. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has repeatedly found that, with other factors equal, larger and heavier vehicles protect their occupants better than smaller and lighter ones. They offer more crush space, and in a collision between vehicles of unequal mass, the lighter vehicle changes speed more violently. Modern small cars can perform well in controlled crash tests because their structures, restraints, and airbags have improved enormously. The barrier in a laboratory does not arrive in the form of a loaded pickup. Automakers have lowered and aligned the crash structures of newer sport utility vehicles, reducing the danger they once posed to car occupants, but pickups remain a harder collision partner. Large vehicles also transfer part of their safety advantage outside the cabin. Their height and weight increase the danger to people in smaller vehicles, and tall front ends are more dangerous to pedestrians and cyclists. For the individual buyer, however, the immediate calculation is personal. A parent standing in a showroom is choosing the steel around one family, not setting the average weight of the national fleet. Each protective purchase makes the next protective purchase more reasonable. That is how an arms race can look like ordinary shopping. The industry found a shape that could satisfy the desire for height without requiring the mass or mechanical layout of an old truck. The crossover used car-based construction, front-wheel drive in many versions, and efficient four-cylinder engines, then added a taller roof, an upright seating position, and sport utility styling. For many owners, it was a useful improvement. The higher roof made child seats easier to reach, the rear hatch accepted bulky cargo, and the seating position helped older drivers enter without dropping into a low cushion. A compact crossover could deliver those advantages while using little more fuel than a conventional compact car. That honest utility is one reason the shift cannot be blamed entirely on regulation or advertising. The small car had acquired a competitor that gave many buyers more of what they valued for a manageable increase in price. But the comparison was never equal for the manufacturer. The crossover could be built from related components and sold for thousands of dollars more. A customer might compare monthly payments rather than total prices, turning a large difference on the window sticker into a smaller difference every month. The lenders stretched the term, the dealer added options, and the more profitable vehicle became the attainable one. Meanwhile, every new vehicle needed engineering work that did not become proportionally cheaper when the vehicle became smaller. Crash structures had to be designed and tested. Emission systems had to be certified. Airbags, stability control, tire pressure monitoring, cameras, computers, wiring, and infotainment systems had to be purchased and installed. A backup camera occupies roughly the same role in a basic hatchback as it does in a luxury sport utility vehicle. On an expensive vehicle, that hardware can be absorbed into the price or sold as part of an option package. On a bargain car, every added dollar presses directly against the reason the car exists. A small car also consumes factory time, transportation space, dealership space, advertising, and sales labor. The salesperson can spend an afternoon closing a deal on a $14,000 hatchback or a $40,000 crossover. The manufacturer faces the same choice on a much larger scale. Affordable cars can make money when they sell in enormous volume, when their development costs are shared globally, and when factories run efficiently for years. American demand stopped providing that volume. In 2018, a buyer could still choose from roughly a dozen new small vehicles priced below $20,000. 5 years later, only the Mitsubishi Mirage had an average transaction price below that threshold. Weak demand explains part of the retreat, but the retreat also weakened demand. As models disappeared, dealerships advertised them less, stocked fewer examples, and gave buyers fewer chances to discover that a small car might meet their needs. The remaining products often became associated with rental fleets, entry-level credit, or the absence of a better choice. A tall vehicle, even when based on similar machinery, could be presented as an upgrade. The rulebook changed again as fuel economy standards became more demanding. Beginning with light trucks and later passenger cars, federal targets were tied to a vehicle's footprint, calculated from its wheelbase and track width. Each manufacturer received a fleet target based partly on the sizes of the vehicles it produced. In general, a vehicle with a larger footprint was assigned a less demanding fuel economy target than a smaller vehicle in the same regulatory category. The agencies had a serious reason for choosing this system. A single flat target could encourage manufacturers to make vehicles smaller and lighter to balance inefficient models, potentially increasing the risk to occupants. A footprint system also prevented a company specializing in small vehicles from satisfying an easy corporate average while a full-line manufacturer carried a heavier burden. The rule was designed to distribute the work and avoid forced downsizing. It did not order anyone to stretch a wheelbase or cancel a hatchback. Federal data indicate that average footprints within major vehicle types have been fairly stable since the system took effect, which limits any claim that the formula alone caused a national surge in size. But the signal inside the formula still points in a peculiar direction. A small car receives the strictest target precisely because it is small, even though it already uses less fuel in ordinary driving than many larger vehicles. Making the small car slightly more efficient may require expensive technology for a modest reduction in total fuel use. Selling a larger, more expensive vehicle gives the manufacturer more room to pay for that technology, and depending on its classification and footprint, a different compliance target. The government was trying to prevent unsafe downsizing. The market learned that upsizing carried fewer penalties. Federal categories add another complication because the showroom word crossover does not determine whether a vehicle counts as a car or a truck. Many two-wheel drive crossovers are regulated as cars, while vehicles meeting certain weight, cargo, seating, or off-road criteria can enter the truck fleet. This means there is no single loophole through which every crossover passes. There is a collection of lines, formulas, and exceptions built at different times for different purposes. Each rule can be defended on its own terms. Together, they made the ordinary low-priced car the hardest product on which to earn an attractive return. Ford made the industry's direction unusually plain in April of 2018. Under Chief Executive Jim Hackett, the company told investors that it would stop investing in most traditional Ford sedans for North America. The Fiesta, Focus, Fusion, and Taurus were marked for departure, leaving the Mustang and a proposed Focus Active crossover style model. That proposed Focus variant was later dropped from the American plan as well. Ford did not claim that sedans had become impossible to build. It said demand and profitability had moved elsewhere. General Motors ended the Chevrolet Cruze and Sonic, then kept the smaller Spark alive a little longer. The Spark was a narrow hatchback built in South Korea with a starting price below $15,000 before delivery charges. Production continued through August of 2022. When General Motors confirmed the cancellation, it pointed price-conscious customers toward Chevrolet's compact sport utility vehicles. There was no direct replacement. Honda withdrew the Fit from the American market. Toyota dropped the Yaris. Hyundai ended the Accent. Kia ended the Rio. And Mitsubishi finished its American run of the Mirage. These companies continued selling small cars in other countries. The product had not become obsolete. Its American price and volume had stopped supporting its place in the showroom. The semiconductor shortage after 2020 made the arithmetic harsher. When manufacturers could not build every vehicle they might have sold, they directed scarce chips and factory capacity toward expensive models and well-equipped trims. Dealers operating with limited inventory could collect larger margins without keeping rows of basic cars on the lot. Customers paid more, borrowed longer, or entered the used market. The production shortage eased, but the cheap nameplates did not return. By then, the average new vehicle transaction price was approaching $50,000, and vehicles listed below $30,000 made up a small fraction of the market. The disappearance of new economy cars also reduced the future supply of inexpensive used cars. A basic new hatchback sold today would have become a basic used hatchback for a student, retiree, or working family several years later. When that first sale never happens, the second buyer eventually loses a choice as well. The market can appear healthy while serving a narrower public. Manufacturers sell profitable vehicles, buyers with sufficient income receive more power and equipment, and average fuel economy can still improve through better engines, hybrids, and electric vehicles. People priced out of the new market do not appear in the sales chart as demand for a missing car. They appear at a used car lot, in an older vehicle kept on the road, or in no transaction at all. That brings the story back to the Versa moving through Aguascalientes. Nissan did not stop making the sedan. It refreshed the car for Mexico, where compact sedans still sell in the volume needed to justify them. The American version ended after 2025, taking the last sub-$20,000 new car with it. Its departure was not one executive's mistake, one regulation's hidden command, or one sudden change in taste. Americans bought larger vehicles because many were comfortable, practical, and safer for their occupants, while manufacturers promoted them because they carried higher prices and stronger margins. Trade policy encouraged producers to move upscale. Fuel economy law treated cars and trucks differently. Footprint rules softened the target as size increased, and cheap fuel reduced the reward for choosing less vehicle. The small car faced every pressure at once. A Corolla beside a gasoline line, a Caravan inside a suburban garage, an Explorer above a sedan, an empty space where the Fit used to sit, and a new Versa that stops at the Mexican border all belong to the same record. America did not simply decide that small cars were unwanted. Over decades, it built a system in which selling fewer expensive vehicles made more sense than selling many affordable ones, then treated the resulting sales figures as a clean expression of preference. If a safe, efficient small car can still be built and sold in Mexico, should American policy give it the same chance it gives a taller, heavier vehicle?